human perspective.
Welcome to Unbiased and On the Fence. I'm Shane. This is Paranormal Frequencies. And wow, we have a special guest that we are so excited to have here. Sherry, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes, hey y'all. Tonight we have Curtis Childs from the Off the Left Eye YouTube channel. He's a representative of the Swedenborg Foundation. He's the digital media producer at the Swedenborg Foundation and the host of the weekly web series Swedenborg and Life, Off the Left Eye YouTube channel. Curtis, welcome. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this?
Yeah, welcome, Curtis.
Sure. And thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate getting a chance to talk about this stuff with all of you. Yeah, so who I am is, I mean, you summed it up pretty well there. I am
It's,
like representing, trying to put Swedenborg's ideas out on YouTube is sort of the job that me and my team take on, which might seem like a strange thing to spend all your time doing. But to me, Swedenborg's ideas, even though they come from this strange source, like this 18th century sort of mystic scientist, this like combination as these old books, but yet I find in them like this amazing tools to help. Nothing's helped me with my own mind and life better than Swedenborg. Nothing is a better sort of way for me to sort out what I go through on a daily basis. Is a better way for me to get ahead of my negative stuff and instead like work on the parts of me that are better. Nothing is moving me towards being a better person to hang out with more than Swedenborg. And the way that it's touched me and has helped me when I really needed it, when I really felt like this is like, I don't know what I'm going to do. The concepts in there were of such, there were so much medicine to me that I feel like no, we've got to put them out. And so we started doing this on YouTube, and I wasn't sure, is anybody going to think this is good, or are they going to laugh us out of YouTube? But it's been awesome the last 5-6 years that we've been doing this to see people finding things of value in there like I did. And so it's this motivation to, okay, if you've been helped by something, you feel like you should make sure that anyone else who needs that same kind of help can get it. So we're working very hard to pull the ideas out, put them into ways that people can metabolize them and use them and gain benefit and really give them a chance. Because at first, when you at first blush, you may think this is not something I need, and it's our job to show you that, hey, just make sure you know all the potential here. There could be something that's helpful to you. So to see it actually helping people out in the world is like the coolest thing. So I never would have expected that this is the kind of thing I would be doing, but I'm doing it now and really happy to do it. And so that's sort of like a one answer to both questions, but I'm happy to go into any more on any particular part of that if you want.
yeah, well, I actually found Swedenborg because I was very into like the Monroe Institute, but more so like Edgar Casey and all of
Yeah.
his information. And when I found the Swedenborg stuff, it was like, wow. I mean, it was so, old, ain't, older. It was
Yeah.
so well documented. Like, he was an amazing person. You know what I mean? Can you just tell us a little bit like about him?
Yeah. So and I'm not like I know a good amount about him. There's other people who are like actually experts and could tell you like when did he move to Amsterdam and how long did he live in London for. But I can give you the basics, which is that everybody would know who Swedenborg is today if he had continued on his career path. Because so he was, 18th century. So this is 1700s. He actually born in like 1680s, I think. But he was mid 1700s, like the man as far as the scientific community went. He was what they call a Renaissance man. This is well after the Renaissance, but he was good at everything mental. Like he was the head of the Swedish mining industry, which at the time was the prominent industry for a world power. He was this leading anatomist. He was an inventor. He did all kinds of things and did really well at them. So he was on track to be like, I don't know if like as good as a Newton, but like somewhere up there where we would have already learned about him in history books. But then when he was in his mid 50s, and you can see it's all documented. You can see he starts to catalog a journal he was keeping of his travels, just like saying, I went to Amsterdam. He starts to record his dreams in it, and his dreams start to get more intense. And then he starts to try to interpret and psychoanalyze those dreams, this is way before there's any such thing as psychology as a formal science. But he's like, this is what I think this means. The dreams get more and more intense, and then he undergoes what we would now call like a spiritual awakening or transformation. Whatever it is, the veil breaks down, and suddenly he can see all of life. Like he's recording, and he records in amazing detail. Not only does he have this 30-year record of what's going on with him through this journal of spiritual experiences, but then he abandons a lot of these scientific pursuits, not totally, but really takes his career on a hard left turn or hard right, whatever you want to call that, and begins to publish this, what I would call a theory of everything, like this framework for what are the forces behind the life that we experience day to day, but also what are we meant to be doing? How do you do it? What's the big picture? The big picture is a good way to put it. So he wrote all these books about it, and they included things like, I can visit life after death. I can talk with people who have passed away. I've seen angels. I know things about God. So, as you can imagine, the scientific community kind of brushed him off and ridiculed him, and he lost a lot of credibility. And so now nobody knows who Swedenborg is. But I would say that the stuff he did, his spiritual stuff, is way cooler than all the scientific stuff he did. And it wasn't like he said, science was useless. It's of no value to study the physical world. To him, everything he learned about anatomy, about the way the world works, this was the foundation for the spiritual stuff. He saw that his life was always kind of meant to be on this track, and that everything he was learning was just leading up to this. And so he kept at that. And what I think something that makes him remarkable in the world of spiritual experiences is I don't think there's ever a more consistent, lengthy, systematic record of spiritual experience than Swedenborg's. You've got him for like 30 years worth, and he's retained this mind that is really scientifically oriented. So he's able to, as best as you can without tools and the things that we benefit from here, exploring it not just like a traveler, but like a rover on the moon, like taking samples of things, organizing things. So Swedenborg, I think anybody who's interested in spiritual life in any kind of way, would do well to just check out what he has, because I've heard from a lot of people that he provides a framework that kind of ties a lot of things together from all kinds of traditions and fills in some gaps, as well as having a bunch of stuff that you never would have thought of, but seems really cool and actually can change your life when you start to put it in action. So there's my short bio of Swedenborg.
Oh yeah, that's what it did for me, because it seems like, all these little pieces that I was getting from everywhere, when you read this information, it just like kind of it just sums it up nicely. But I did want to say that it seems like when he talks about the spiritual awakening and the symptoms that he said, it just seems like he started having like out of body experiences, and I've noticed that in the Bible, all of those people, the spiritual experiences they had, they were altering their state of consciousness. You know what I mean? Now,
yeah.
But I don't know because doesn't he say it was like a near-death experience? But I think because he describes the classic symptoms of like a OBE. You know what I mean?
Yes. So Swedenborg is also remarkable because in the near-death experience community, there are so many consistencies with what he reports. A couple hundred years before the modern near-death experience phenomenon, there was, Raymond Moody, when he invented the term near-death experience, that was in his book Life After Life, which I think was either the 70s or the 80s when it came out. But in there he had this section of parallels of things that he thought, after he'd cataloged what a modern near-death experience is like, he looked back and said, okay, here are the things that I think are a little similar to that. And I can't remember them all. I know one of them was the Bible. One of them was the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I think there was another one in there. And then Swedenborg got his own section because there was so many. And to a Swedenborg fan like myself, anytime anyone mentions Swedenborg at all, it's like, yeah, we made it into this book. But there is a particular point at which Swedenborg describes the dying process. And it's not, he wasn't, this was one of many experiences he had. And it wasn't like a classic near death experience where it was prompted by some kind of physical danger. But he does say that he was able to see what it's like to die. But yet a part of him remained conscious enough that he could later, write it down. And in there, that was part of what got Raymond Moody and others interested. I remember Kenneth Ring, who started the International Association for Near-Death Studies, or was a co-founder, wrote an introduction to a book about Swedenborg and the NDE. And he said something, I'm just paraphrasing, but he's like, in the NDE, we peeked through the door into the afterlife. Swedenborg explored the whole house. Like there's so much, and it's a cool balance, because I love near-death experiences, and they do present you with a level of like emotional color and depth and immediacy that you're hard pressed to find in Swedenborg, just because he's writing in Latin a couple hundred years ago. The two make a very good partnership, because you get details and the emotional gravity of it from the NDE, but then like the structure and a huge, expansive, consistent thing from Swedenborg. So to put all those together is just this awesome look at what it could well be life actually is, and a much better version of life than you would think just sitting around in this world.
Exactly. Like there's the near-death experience, and then what happens, and that's what he brings to the table. So real quick, I wanted to tell you, while I was studying the Swedenborg stuff, this experience I had. My daughter was very sick, and they had medicated her very heavily. And so I was laying by her, and I had my hand on her because her breathing was very shallow, and I was falling asleep. And so I was trying to stay awake so bad to keep, to watch her.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, through the window, and I know that I was like probably just phased a little bit out of body, but through the window comes these, and then at the same time through the hallway wall came like 15 or 20 orbs, like on each side. And they came over my body. And when they got over my body and they were all together, it sounded like happy people visiting in a restaurant and laughing and talking.
Yeah.
And this all real fast. It was like a highway, and they merged together, and they were going like this. And then they like flew through the wall behind my head. And way at the end, there was one orb, and it sounded like this fat, happy old black man. And he goes, and just went on through there. But I had this knowing that it was like some kind of like soul group or soul family or people connected to me. And they just like, it was like a little highway merging. And I don't know, it was just really neat, because I've been studying all this stuff so much. I had just finished listening to a video when it happened.
Yeah.
It was really neat. And so, also it helped my dad or helped my mom a lot dealing with my dad's death. I would just take Swedenborg videos to her and just showing her, all this stuff of because it's very comforting to people going through that. Like I've had hospice patients I showed it to and stuff too.
Yeah, well, so I'm so glad to hear that our material could be helpful in situations like those. You remember I was talking in the beginning about if I feel like this can be helpful in the places where we really need it. And there's also a lot of times when the impact that the videos that we have make is way beyond anything that I would have thought we could have got out of them. Like that somehow the concepts in there can help people in situations like that when you're going through the worst stuff, losing people are in trouble. So to me, it feels like a little miracle that, okay, we try to make this video, but it then on the other side, somehow people watching it does something with them, that this is the whole point. Is we know we all go through these hard things. How can we reach out to each other there? So I wanted to just thank you for sharing that story. And it's like, okay, this is why we're trying to do this. And I'm so glad that it could play some kind of part in something good there.
Yes. I wanted to turn everything over to Shane now, because I just couldn't wait to get a hold of me and start telling all that stuff. So
thank you.
Well, I'm kind of curious. Another question that you had, Sherry, that story that you said was Off the Left Eye, the name?
Yeah.
Yep. There's a story behind that.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I guess the name is doing its job if it's getting people to ask about it. So because think of the setting. So this was back in 2011 is when I first created the channel. And I was thinking I'm going to take Swedenborg, which is this, right? I already talked about what, how difficult he is to interface with, and he sort of sounds Christian, but sort of sounds New Age. And I just didn't know, and I didn't know YouTube very well. And I thought, who is ever going to be interested in this? And how can I get people to listen without people throwing it away because it sounds too religious or not religious enough, or what is it? So I thought, I want to start with some kind of name that's not going to mean anything, that's just going to be intriguing. So I opened up Swedenborg's Heaven and Hell, which is his most popular book, and I just started looking for cool phrases. And there was another one that I found, but one of the first ones I found was actually in that description that I was just mentioning of him experiencing the dying process. So he says he's going through and he can feel kind of being pulled out of his body. And he describes two phases with two different groups of angels. Like there was first what he calls heavenly or more inward angels that were really connecting with him in an emotional way. So he had this heart connection, but as his spirit began to wake up, and he started to be able to use his sort of intellectual faculty and gain spiritual sight, as he called it, he says it seemed like there was sort of a representation of a covering being pulled off of his left eye, because the left has to do with the intellectual side. And so it's sort of like this clearing up of ideas so he could really see what was there. So that's kind of a cool tagline to have, because what we were trying to do is give people good ideas to work with, and then the right side, sort of the emotional or the volitional or the doing side, that's up to people to go take it out into the world and do stuff with. So that's the story of offTheLeftEye.
Oh, I love that, man. And I tell you what, man, what's cool is I've come across stuff that is so timely with right now, but it's been around for a while, and I'm just amazed at how relevant, especially when it comes to this material you present. I had it come the same way with the I Am discourse and information. I was like, wow, it's 100 years old, and this is even older. I think I'm kind of taken to that scripture in Daniel where, people will run to and fro and knowledge will increase. And I'm seeing this emergence of this great spiritual knowledge that's been there all along. It's sort of hidden or just obscured in some kind of way. So I think not only what you're doing, I see it, in all aspects of spiritual teachings that it seems to have been lost. I mean, now they're coming out, and it's amazing how old they are, yet relevant they are to what we're dealing with today.
Yeah, it's cool. I think ahead of his time is a good way to describe Swedenborg, because a lot of things that he was saying back in the mid 1700s, when Europe was a theocracy and the church was everything, but he's saying, listen, many different spiritualities can be a path to that mindset that he calls heaven. It's just, you got to live rightly by what you believe. Now it's pretty cool to say that. It wasn't cool back then, or it wasn't cool with the church. His works got put on trial. There was but then even, you've had people talk about the world outside space and time. He says the spiritual world, the world of consciousness is outside space and time. And now you start to have things that are seeming to confirm that from a physics standpoint. There's a lot that seems like, I just don't know if it went over everyone's head back in the day when he was saying it, but maybe now we're catching up to understanding what he was getting at.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Does Swedenborg ever get into tips on how he was able to achieve some of these out of body or these states of consciousness?
It's funny how unhelpful he is about that, considering how much he wrote. And we do get those questions because, he published like 30 volumes, and really I couldn't point you to a good passage that says, okay, you sit cross-legged and you close your eyes and hold your breath or something like that. He obviously was doing things. He talks about meditating on particular concepts. He will give you the mechanics. I just recorded a show this morning about what happens when you can see the spiritual world, and it's about the physical disengaging with the conscious part of you, so then you can see spiritually. But he never really gives you a step-by-step how to, but he's very focused on telling you how to do everything else. Like, he really, to him, like, personal ethical development and spiritual development you couldn't take them apart. Like, he says, you want to get to enlightenment, get to heaven, here's the way you can work to not be a jerk and be nice. Like, and this is part of the path to that stuff. That stuff will really be potent for you. By that stuff, I mean spiritual insight, or being able to overtly kind of pierce the veil, that will really help if it goes hand in hand with love and wisdom. But on the other hand, his ability to see the spiritual world, vastly improved his ability to give us good information and to perceive. He talked about being able to, whenever he was kind of getting any kind of influence in his thoughts and feelings, if he could sort of trace the spiritual origins of that and see exactly if it was valuable or true or what. So it's not like he was saying, oh, it's not a useful tool to be able to see these things. He also talks about how conditions were supposed to be that everybody could do it. That right now, the way it is, where according to him and a lot of other traditions, there's kind of a physical level of existence, and then there's a something beyond that. But yet, for a lot of people, there's this huge debate: is there even anything beyond the physical? Because it's such a wall in between the two. And like when we lose somebody that we love, and we can have like some kind of strong conviction that they're still out there. But for a lot of people, I don't know if you just wink out at death and that's all. The fact that we could even have that isn't how it should be. And Swedenborg talked about sort of how it was back in the day, whenever that was, is you would kind of know when you were going to die, and like people who did could often just drop in and talk to you, no problem, which some people still have that, but not everybody. So it's a condition that we're all supposed to get to someday. Like, it's how it should be, but yet he didn't seem to be able to say, here's the step by step to get you there. Although there's so much data in there, you could comb through there, and you can pick out certain things. And but also, what's intriguing to me is that even like myself, I haven't ever had a spiritual experience, like you would say, like where I saw something that was obviously beyond the physical, but yet I can take his principles and apply them to my regular life and get and be making, even though he's talking about things like spirits and how they operate, and I can apply that to my own mind and life and get results. They're not the same results as his, but they're really useful. So it's sort of like he can be a really good aid to people who can, pierce the veil and travel, but also a really good aid to those of us who are just loving hearing other people's stories about it, but haven't been able to do it for themselves.
Very nice. So you haven't had any out of body experiences or astral travels or
No, I'm hoping for one during this interview, but no, I haven't. I haven't. I have, obviously long been a fan of learning about them, especially particularly, the near-death experience in Swedenborg, because of the potential to solve the problems in life. Like when somebody goes, the world people describe it in an NDE, the kind of love that they describe, the perspective on life they get, like that's what I want life to be, and that's what I want to work towards. But yeah, no, I'm just like an armchair spirituality guy in that sense.
well, I think a lot of times, sometimes people experience the NDE as a wake up call, and other people sort of get lucky if it were. Or maybe they had an NDE in their future as a catalyst at some point, but maybe they didn't reach that point, Maybe they caught the hints before it got that extreme with the catalyst or
Yeah,
whatever.
right. I think it's been I see an upside to it in that, my job is to try to explain these spiritually kind of concepts to people in a way that's understandable. So the fact that I haven't, maybe that helps me in some way kind of talk about it with other people who haven't, so like is that part of the role I can be doing? And yeah, you never know. I mean,
The
I
reason for it.
yeah, right. So, and this is where I am right now. Who knows what happens in the future? But that's why I'm especially grateful for people being willing to share what does happen to them. And that was really how, when I first started doing the Swedenborg thing, we were on Facebook actually, and we had a page I was telling you guys about before the interview where we would post these little Swedenborg quotes. And the first people that really came in and made that thing start to take off were people who wanted to say, I've had this experience and I want to tell you about it. And I couldn't find anyone to tell about it, so I want to talk about it. And just amazing the breadth of kinds of experiences people have had, and how the ubiquity of them, how many people have had things like that. It's amazing. And the web, doing this social media thing where you get this instant feedback, lets me learn about all kinds of experiences people have had. And it also brings this sort of community, because you're like, I have a lot of people who are like, I just need somebody to talk to about this because my family doesn't want to talk about it, you know. So
Yeah.
we're providing sort of hopefully like a space where people can, because we're talking about Swedenborg's experiences, we normalize talking about spiritual experiences. Other people feel like they can share theirs as well.
And that's exactly why we're here and why we do what we do, man. And people, we
Right
have our
on.
Friday show where people call in, and people actually want to hear their experiences. So it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing, and people have like that feeling of home, away
Right.
from their regular home.
That's
So I
cool.
think that's all part of the design. It seems like a divine gathering in this time of people that have, for the most part, felt like they're sort of off in the wilderness by themselves because they decided to use religion as a stepping stone to greater spirituality. And people get comfortable in their religion, and if you've surrounded yourself with all of that, then it's like you're kind of ostracized, if you will. Like you lose all your friends and family that want to stay behind, and all of a sudden you're backslidden. And but anyway, so it's just great that we can all come together. A lot of people have come through a religion of some sorts or whatever. And are you finding this story among a lot of people that, like, wow, there's other people like me that's you know
Yes, I think when you have something that's important to you, or especially if it's become kind of a guiding principle in your life, whatever spiritual set of parameters you're working towards, you want to talk to people about it, you know, and
yeah,
you want to be heard, and you want to share, you want to learn. There's this natural urge to get together, and we do find that the worldview that we're setting out from Swedenborg, because it meshes so well with a lot of people have experienced. You do get this sense of, oh yeah, I found a community. This is a place where what I believe fits, because what we believe about life really matters, and you can definitely have great conversation and time with people who don't share your beliefs. But if you never have other people who you can really talk with about the things that are most deeply important in your life, there's going to be a little bit of a hole, I think. So to me, getting to talk about Swedenborg stuff to people is a dream come true. I mean, we do this show called News from Heaven where I just get to read through Swedenborg and like circle things and talk about things and draw things. I never would have thought you could get away with that and have anybody be interested. So to me, this has been a community for me to get to, that we get to not just talk about stuff, but I can put out an idea and hear how it impacts people and hear their take on it. People will think up things about it that I never thought of. It's a very cool feeling, and you get people, yeah, the sort of mass exodus from traditional religion, in people who still have attachments to certain parts. It's like, oh, this part didn't work for me, but this part does. Now where do I go? A lot of
right.
times Swedenborg will provide a good framework for that, because he does have, I feel like, a foot in both worlds, you know, that he'll use language that can be familiar to people coming from different kinds of Christian traditions, but also language that's familiar to people coming from experiential learning, and that the sort of philosophy he puts out is very much um, leave the individual in freedom. You know, think for yourself. Commanding people to do stuff like doesn't do anything. It's got to be something you weigh rationally on your own and come to your own decisions about. And we try to then, as a nonprofit, try to present things in a very, like you guys are doing here, in a very, like the whole name of your channel, unbiased and on the fence. Like, we're providing public access to this stuff. We're not going to try to reach into your living room and control you, and we're not going to make you sign a membership card to get in. We're going to give you stuff that we feel like is important, and we respect you as an adult human being. That's like, we're just glad you're here for the conversation. So I think that's like the modern way to think about these things and talk about them. And hopefully we can get to a place where there is some positive communication with the good parts of the open-minded parts of people in their religious traditions, you know, so that there's some kind of good cross-pollination. And when there's not, at least, you know, give people who don't have a community.
Like you said about like you feel like maybe you weren't having experience, so you could relate more to people that come that haven't. um in the work that I do with working with hospice patients and things like that, I've had, and then with my dad dying also, I've seen where people that like are dying more slowly. It's almost like you said, they end up having one foot on each side, and they'll have these experiences where they're having friends and family visit them. And I have even like evidentiary support that's come through on this, like, one lady that I worked with, when she would talk to one of these people, the baby monitor, when the spirit being was speaking, would be like, and then it would stop, and she was talking, and pretty soon I went in and talked to it and told them, look, if you're going to be nice and be around her, that's fine. And she loved me because I believed her. But I knew, and plus I'd been studying all that stuff. And, my dad had those kind of experiences too. But I want to tell the Swedenborg Foundation, mostly one thing that really helped me was I also work a lot of psychiatric things and at places, and there's a whole video that what's his name, Stu? What's his name? The man on the other man on your channel, that, well, they had a psychiatrist on, no, that was
Yeah.
talking about like how it, how people are influenced spiritually and things like, not, and
Yeah.
they messages from things like that that contribute to their mental illness, and that helped me a lot with my nursing.
Jerry Marzinski, you're probably
Yeah.
talking about. That's right. That's right. That was cool for me getting to meet him. So he had worked in psychiatric settings in prisons and state wards, and then intake in the ER in the hospital. And I met him after he was like using ideas that he had in part gleaned from Swedenborg to have a system of like calming down, and being able to get through to patients who were so overwhelmed by hearing voices and things that they were untouchable otherwise, that he found this system to like get these amazing results with them. So to me, that was a real eye opener to get to talk to him about that, and then use some things from that, even to my own mind, just to unwanted thoughts and feelings that were just trying to run me, because I've had my own struggles with depression and that kind of stuff. So to have that side of it, because really Swedenborg talks about spiritual world, but he has this amazing interface where it's like the spiritual world and the psychological world are really the same sort of thing. So that in its own, some of those have been some of our most popular shows, seeing like what makes us, you think about, you go through your day and why is your mental chatter like it is? Could there be like a whole spiritual reason for it? That has been some of the most helpful stuff to our audience too.
Yeah, and I learned that the dementia patients that I worked with are literally, like, some of them at the end aren't even really there anymore. They're totally checked out and already on the other side. And I have a friend that actually hangs out with her mom on the other side because she goes out of body. And
Mhm.
but there's a sole purpose for the mom still being there and being cared for by the father, like for him. And that's why she's even still there, and she's awake and alert, but she's not like competent at all, like nothing that she says makes any sense or whatever. But she's with her every night on the other side, hanging out and having fun and doing all this stuff. So
Wow.
that's really neat. Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to say about that.
Well, and how cool to think that's part of the power of the spiritual side of life. That what looks like sort of a sad and lonely situation where there's this woman and she's totally out of it, and you might think, if you're just looking from physical appearances, this person, there's nothing going on, or is she in some confusing sort of tortured existence? But what you're saying is that actually there's two good things happening at once. The one is that no, there is the her that's really her is still there and still alive, and she gets to go and actually almost start this new amazing journey rather than just like fading out, that she's having fun. And then on the other side, that life is structured in a way that she's there to help her husband, that there is this larger sort of current of love that arranges things, and that there is a positive reason for people to be interacting. Those are two very, very cool uh, aspects of life, and getting to just peek beyond the physical appearance lets us know, because I love the spiritual side, because there's obvious love in it, and there's hope in it in a way that there sometimes isn't on this side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's cool with this information because you get a little peek on the other side because when you're not awakened, this is all there is, this 3D reality, this physical world. So with this information, it gives you a little peek of what to expect on the other side and how much more big it is compared to what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, Swedenborg wrote, going from this world into the spiritual world is like going from a little village into a big city. Like in,
Oh,
in so
wow.
many ways, there's like so much going on there, and that really what's going on here is in some ways like almost like a ripple or like a skin on top of the source of what we experience here.
Very much so. Your newest video was talking about, well, it was before the one you just premiered one tonight, but one that was talking about, I guess, heavenly freedom or hellish freedom, or was it freedom the right word for it?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so that was one of the newer concepts that I was just checking out that video, and really I've come across this all the time where people are sort of in a hellish freedom, and realizing that they can wake up to something grander just from within themselves. They don't have to depend on anyone else. It's sort of this concept. Can you kind of go over that as one of the concepts that you can get from Swedenborg?
Sure. Yeah. So Swedenborg will use the terms heaven and hell, which we're familiar with from Christianity since the time immemorial, but he will apply them to this very interesting mix of sort of, sure, afterlife descriptions of like afterlife stuff, but really states of mind. And he talks about that we all have sort of heavenly and hellish tendencies within us. And we would now, I mean, you might call hellish stuff ego stuff. This is small-minded, antisocial, our own urges above everything. And then there's heavenly, which you would call altruistic or compassionate, or basically the realization that other people matter and exist.
Right.
So he has this, Swedenborg will do this all the time where he'll use a term that we're familiar with, like in this case, freedom, but give it this spin and expand the concept to say, this is what I'm talking, this is a spiritual principle that underlies it. And he basically describes freedom as our interest in doing things. So if you think about what makes you feel free, you feel the most free when you get to go do what you want to do. If you're
Right.
held back from doing what you want to do, that's really when you feel like you're not free. There's a million things right now that I can't do, but I don't care because I don't want to do them. It's really about when you're held back from doing what you want to do. So he actually talks about two different kinds of freedom, and that there's a heavenly freedom and a hellish freedom. And these correspond to two different states of mind that we get in. So you're in hellish freedom when you're basically being run by sort of cravings and urges and impulsive egoic stuff, where you may do that stuff because you want to, or you get some kind of reward, some kind of dopamine hit from whatever it is, whether you get angry at people, or you got some kind of negative behavior that we get into, because there's almost negative behaviors have some sort of reward, like it feel like, okay, yeah, I got my vengeance, whatever it is.
Right.
He calls that hellish freedom, because when you really think about the effect it has on your life, the effect it has on the other people, and your ability to stop if you want it. Like a lot of the times that stuff takes us over, and I don't want to be like this anymore, but you can't. That's really spiritual slavery is what he calls it. This is the freedom that the hell mindset gives you, which is really not where you want to be. But heavenly freedom is actually the desire to, I like the idea of helping this person because I can imagine what it'd be like to be in their shoes, or even better, I just like them, or I get that they're a person. Or why would you, of course you want to do something good, of course that makes sense. It's insane actually to think we would have this general reaction to like, oh, something bad happened to that person, which is crazy because we wouldn't want that to happen to us. So when you actually step back and know what the real thing is, this heavenly freedom is, how cool is it when the thing you want to do and the thing that's actually good to do are the same thing? You can do that. It's like when I think about like what I used to, like what was I getting my kicks out of when I was a teenager? It's like, okay, danger, or like something that's not healthy for my body or something like that, versus now when I'm an adult, and like what I can get really excited about is doing work, doing something constructive at my job, which there's unlimited access to that, and you can do that and go with it. And actually you feel better the more you do it. Whereas this other stuff, there's all kinds of repercussions. So the heavenly freedom is this feeling that we build as we go through life and it's, through our spiritual practice a lot of the time, because the hellish freedom, it's pushy. It wants to be in your face, and it doesn't want to give any ground. So we're a lot of, if not all, spiritual practices are like, okay, how can I minimize the amount I'm giving into that stuff and kind of maximize going after whatever I believe is good and true. The more that we cultivate that, and it's a process, just like, if you're ever gardening, and I've, had started to do that, but it's like, man, I thought I picked all these plants last year and everything's coming back up, just like we have to slowly work away at that. Over time, the heavenly freedom grows, and then it becomes, you start to love more and more doing what's good. And if you think about the more everybody loves that, the more that you can trust when you go to the car dealership, that the person selling you the car actually cares about you rather than just cares about how can I get as much money out of you as I can. Imagine what the world would be like
Oh, it'd
if
be
we're
beautiful.
wherever you, whatever exit, wherever you are that you pulled off, like I can trust these people because they are going through, they're going from heavenly freedom, that they're finding joy in love. That's the world, that heavenly freedom can kind of lead us toward. And it's just takes a takes a while to really realize how much better that is than hellish freedom, because in the beginning both can kind of seem the same. It's like, oh, this is fun, what's the big difference? But through spiritual practice, through life experience, you really understand, one of these things is not like the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you can really see how if you could get everybody on board with it, then you would have everybody in the world looking out for you, and everyone else, you looking out for everyone else. And it's the difference between having to look out for yourself or having every single person looking out for you where you
Yeah,
don't have to.
that's
You know
right.
what I mean?
That's right. Well, and you know what Swedenborg says, that the model for that, the blueprint for that, we're all actually wearing that right now. Because if you look at the human body, what you just described is the situation of every cell in the body. The whole, if I'm a cell in the liver tissue somewhere, all the oxygen I've got, the lungs took care of that, brought that in for me. I'm protected by the ribs and the skin and the pleura or whatever the membranes are in there, right? And so the whole body, the whole community loves me and is taking care of me, because they're taking care of the whole body. And in turn, I'm giving everything I have to purifying the blood. I'm just putting it right out there. That Swedenborg actually says that is heaven. When we get into that state, that really all of us are sort of a little example physically of where the human race can go spiritually if we all pursue this, heaven state of mind.
Does Swedenborg ever talk about a human evolution path or an ascension path or anything along those lines? Like you hear so much in pretty much religion or New Age or anything. There's the
Yeah.
rapture or ascension or just
Right.
anything like that from him.
Yeah. So he talks about it. So again, Swedenborg will have sort of alternative definitions for every religious term you can think of. And when
Mm-hmm.
he'll talk about the church. And when he's talking about churches, there's a couple of different meanings he can have for them. He'll sometimes use it to refer to what we would think of as a church, which is like a religious organization or a building. But most of the time, there is these two sort of psychological meanings to it. In the most basic sense, the church is the state of your heart and mind in the positive sense. So everybody is a little church. Your sort of doctrine is what you believe is good and right to do, and what you actually go and live by. That's kind of like your church. So he'll talk about that, but then he talks about these sort of eras of church in a collective sense. So he'll talk about there was an initial, what he calls the most ancient church, which doesn't mean a particular religious group. It could be composed of a bunch of them, but they all had a similar motivation to do good. So he talks about this progression that actually there was the purest kind of motivation, way back, and he doesn't give a specific date range for it, but back in the day, then there was sort of the ancient church phase after that. Then it got further and further down. So as people became more materialistic and more warlike, that the sort of intuitive goodness that we had kind of got lost, and so now we have to claw our way back into it. But he does talk about what he calls the new church, which he says that humanity is kind of on the cusp and was on the cusp. He was writing a couple hundred years ago, but said this is just starting to kick into motion where there's going to be a new era, and the kind of stuff that I was talking about before, like maybe we reconnect with a sort of open communication with heaven, or with life after death, and sort of become native in this heavenly mindset we're talking about. He says that's coming if we all are going to choose it, which he seems confident that we will. So he describes this new church. He actually goes into like saying that a lot of the prophetic material in the Bible, if you look at it through this sort of symbolic lens, kind of like you dream in symbols, the same kind of thing, it's actually describing like not a specific like, okay, this is the cities that'll be there, this is how it's going to go, but this is a new way of looking at life and a new way of living and a new way of seeing each other. In his mind, the best is yet to come. Like we're gonna get over this whole like warlike miserable phase that we've been in and get to this sort of altruism and realizing our full potential, like we were just talking about, everybody working for that good. That's coming up. So that, I think that would be roughly equivalent to sort of ascension path. Again, it couldn't come fast enough, but he seems confident that we're going in a good direction, which kind of makes me optimistic.
And I had saw the video a long back, but can you explain about Swedenborg's take on the law of attraction?
Yeah, sure. So one other thing we try to do in this our channel is, because a lot of the stuff that you were just saying, ascension, law of attraction, that these weren't concepts, or are certainly not linked with those terms in Swedenborg's day. So we try to pick through what he's talking about and see where is the equivalent, and what commentary does he have on modern things like law of attraction. So we have a whole show called "Is the Law of Attraction Real?" And it's this fascinating mix that he gives of, he does describe phenomena in the spiritual world that work a lot like, I'm not an expert in, and law of attraction, when people say it, it means so many different things. I've seen different groups have it mean different things, but I feel like if we're using like sort of a generic definition for it, boiled down and be like attracts like, is kind of the law of attraction. And he seemed to say that the physical world, you won't always get that. Like, you can, just because something bad happened to you doesn't mean you're a bad person, just because something, that there are other, like in the physical world, there's this gravity and there are things that run it, but spiritually, actually very much like attracts like. So he'll say that, I said before, space and time is not a property of the spiritual world. What is a property of the spiritual world is state. So here, space, like you and I are however many one time zone apart, and that's based on physical space, like how many molecules or whatever you want to say are in between us. Spiritually, distance has to do with similarity or dissimilarity of mind. That people who love the same thing and believe the same thing, it pulls them closer into proximity. And this actually is what creates communities of souls. That you have people who love similar things and believe similar things, they naturally gravitate towards each other. That they're actually what you love, because the spiritual world is this mental, psychological world, rather than being run by a material force like gravity, love plays the same role spiritually that gravity plays physically. So just like gravity is what keeps things, like I'm not an expert in gravity, but as I understand it, it keeps things, like keeps the planets together, keeps the solar system spinning, keeps the whole galaxy together. Gravity is what sets the distances between things, because this thing had this much momentum, but then the gravity pulls it around. So love does that spiritually. So whatever you love and act on pulls you towards people who love and act on similar things. And also, even your surroundings can be sort of a manifestation of the things in your mind and heart. So this interesting mix of like a lot of the sort of things that appear in law of attraction on a spiritual level, but not on a physical level. So that's just a little bit. And again, we have the whole program where we kind of dig into the, like, okay, where does he diverge from that, where does he agree with it, and where does he offer something that isn't out there but could augment it?
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool, because I'm sitting here and thinking that most people that watch that turned around and tried to use it for material things. And it
Right,
was like,
right.
so they would have proved it doesn't work in their own mind, but the people who turned around and tried to use it for spiritual things and try to vibrate at whatever resonant that they're wanting to attract, resonance, then it worked for them.
Yeah.
So it can work on the physical level, but maybe not as quick. Or because I've seen people, and maybe it wasn't the actual law of attraction, but I've seen people seem to attract things, manifestations in the physical.
Yeah, I don't know, and I would say that the Swedenborg's description of how does everything play out physically, he calls it providence. He calls it divine providence, and the things that it does seem like and essentially that is the divine organizing things with the long view in mind. So you may say, like, man, I would really want thing X, like I really want this kind of money, but you don't know really, is that money going to be good or bad for you spiritually,
Right.
because you can get it if the physical is temporary and the spiritual is forever. If you get that thing and it makes you feel good, but it actually makes you more self-centered and lower vibration, or what you were saying, it would be better if you didn't get it. So divine providence is kind of weighing that stuff. Like what, but so at times it's like, oh, it's way above our pay grade, the events in life that are being orchestrated to get us to particularly develop. It's as our spiritual development is as complex as physical development in the womb. You think about everything that has to go right in order for that to happen. But at other times it seems to be that you can be sort of asking for things and get them. And in particular though, like spiritual things, like motivations and love, like the heavenly mindset, the why behind what you're doing. But then other times there are some indications that he gives of, oh yeah, even external things can turn out better for you under certain conditions, but you always got to hold it in. Okay, I'm going for this thing. I would like this thing, but in the end, there's a good plan, And if I don't get this exact thing, I'm not going to freak out. I'm going to be willing to suspend judgments. Okay, this is your call. That's the way you get in what he calls the stream of providence, which is this state where you're at peace with how life is turning out because you believe in the goal and the end. And this is the most happy and productive state you can get into.
That goes right along with what I was thinking earlier, because I think of the whole Garden of Gethsemane scene where Jesus says, "Not my will, but your will be done."
That's right.
And I came to this realization a while back that if we had the knowledge of the infinite Father God, Source, God, Creator, whatever you want to call it, we would be in the will, because ultimately we'd always stay in the will if we were, if we had the knowledge He has. So if we can trust that this person has this oversight or source, has a perspective to see the whole board, so to speak, and you've made it this far, you can sort of relax in the fact that if you're like led by your heart, that you are in the will, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a cool point. That even Jesus Christ is like, okay, I'd rather not do this, but you know what you're doing,
Right, exactly.
Which is sort of like, so you have sort of Jesus as like this human manifestation, of God, and then God, and we sort of have this like conversation within ourselves as well. There's like this part of us that is more plugged in and trusts that when we get into that state of mind, like I know what's going on. And then there's when we're smaller and more confused, and to try to get one to say, all right, I remember that things are good and I can trust. That's like trying to weed that garden. It's hard to get into that state, but definitely when I do, I'm never happier than that. That the piece of getting what you want or ego winning, and that isn't as nice as the piece of, oh, there's this divine plan, in the same plan that's overseeing, that we were talking about earlier, the woman who's sticking around for her husband because that's the best thing for him. When we start to get an inkling that that's out there, that's like actual peace. That's sort of unconditional peace. People talk about unconditional love, but like unconditional peace, that we know that God is smart and smart and loving. So Swedenborg talks about God as love and wisdom, that not just the desire to do everything right, but knowing exactly now and 45 million moves into the future, this is the right thing. And sometimes life is really hard to deal with. So there's sometimes when I feel like I'm stretched a little beyond my breaking point, like, okay, I'm not with you on this. There's no way, even though there's a part of me that thinks, yeah, maybe, but it's just, I go easy on myself there, because it's really tough when hard things happen. I think, I would imagine God sees us in the same way. Like, it's all right, you can freak out about it, throw a fit, and that's fine. I understand what you're going through, but in the end, I'm still going to do this, because you may not get it now, but in the end, you'll see like this was okay. And this goes back to the near-death experiences, that a lot of them, there's one I was thinking of where this woman was very upset about the Vietnam War that was going on, and how could she ever, reconcile that with a just world? But she had this experience, and she was saying, okay, I saw the reasons. I've never heard of somebody having a near-death experience and getting the big explanation for why life is, and saying like, nah, that doesn't do it for me. Like, everybody seems to come back like, okay, wow, you've thought this through.
It's different when you see the bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Is there anything in Swedenborg that you would say has stood out to you as being like super life-changing for you personally? That information that's
Sure.
going to be, a paradigm shifter, if you will?
Yeah. Don't believe everything you think. He never says that directly, but to me, so I have had forever just a very sort of depressive, kind of mind, which is
Mm-hmm.
just like you wake up and it's trying to make you uncomfortable, it's sending these thoughts and feelings. And Swedenborg, in sort of overcoming and mapping the world that leads to that, to me, when I and the sort of counterpoints he gives of like this trusting divine providence that we're just talking about, the stuff he has is the antidote to that, and sort of getting me to see that all of those worries and fears count on you having a false impression of what life is, and just the ways that they count on it. So my own sort of warfare with those thoughts, that was what made Swedenborg real to me. And when I saw those ideas working in that space, when if you've ever had that kind of depression, I had obsessive compulsive, all this stuff where nothing's working, and to see something work, that's kind of like, like when, if we're bringing examples up about Jesus, when he's in the boat and the
Mm-hmm.
storm is there, and the disciples are all saying, this storm is going to kill us, this, we can't take this on. And he wakes up and just says, okay, stop. And the wind and the waves stop, and the disciples are saying, like, who's this? Who's
Right.
this that can do that? And I think it's the same when we run across truth. Swedenborg talks about, God as love and truth. When we run across some bit of truth that calms the storm in the mind, wherever it came from, even if it was written down by some weird guy in Sweden in the mid 1700s, if he was seeing something that does that, I say, like, okay, where did this come from, and what is this? That's part of when you say, okay, I think God is shining through here, just like we see God shining through all these places. But it's really like it's in the results, that it's in bringing peace and happiness into the heart. That's where you feel like, oh, this is something that worth sharing.
Absolutely. Well, do you have any events or anything coming up that you want to talk about, Curtis?
Sure. So we have shows all the time. You know how
Mm-hmm.
it is being on YouTube. You got to make shows all the time.
And I do
And
have your links below,
oh, good,
to
good.
your YouTube channel and to the Swedenborg Foundation website. I don't know if there's anything else, but
Yep,
I can
that's
add them
great.
later if you like.
No,
So
no, that those are good right there. YouTube.com/offTheLeftEye, which is down there. You'll see we have Monday night. We just actually premiered a show right before we
yeah,
started
yeah, I
this.
was watching it. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
cool.
okay, cool. So that's our Monday night Swedenborg and Life show. We also have a panel question and answer show. We do my show News from Heaven twice a week. We have short clips. You'll see a lot there. We have events like we're going to do. We've started to do gatherings where we go out and try to meet the people, that we met online, but in real life. We just had one in Manhattan like a couple of days ago. We're going to do one in Los Angeles, July 14th, so Wayfarers Chapel there. Then we're going to do one in Philadelphia at World Cafe Live, October 27th. So all those are out there. We'd love, if you've been watching the channel, we'd love to come and meet you. And then other than that, it's just like tune into the show and write us a comment, and we try to get to all of them, because if you took the time, we want to check in with you.
Awesome. Now they can find out more about these events on the Swedenborg Foundation website. Is it under
That
the events tab? Or?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you should be able to find out stuff there. I think there'll be stuff on. If we haven't posted it soon, it'll be up there in a little bit. Yeah, and we're gonna try to, we love to see you there. And if you can't see you there, we'll see you on the internet. That's the cool thing about the internet, is it's everywhere all the time. So
That's
Also,
really cool because we've been doing the get together things too. It
yeah.
just started like last year, and we're having one in at East City Ranch in Washington in August. But
Oh,
yeah, I
cool.
felt this need for us to get together and meet in real life too because I don't know. Besides that, it just seems like it just could be just bots on the internet
That's right.
watching. So at least you get to see it's real people on the other end,
It's
get to hug their neck and all that stuff. So it's really cool.
it's awesome.
I thought it was important to mention that the five main books, that a lot that y'all teach from a lot, are available on your website as a PDF that people can just, like, a little ebook thing, right?
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit, so we try to make a lot of stuff we do available to the public. So all the books are available for free download as a PDF. Yeah, just go into Swedenborg.com, and there's a tab for Swedenborg's writings. And we also have, I think, some free ebook versions and some like $1 ebook, because they're like hosted on Amazon or whatever. It has to cost something. So, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of ways to get that stuff very inexpensively, or free, which is preferable.
And we can leave the audience with the fact that I saw it myself. Swedenborg even touches on alien life.
Yeah, we got it all. Yep, that's right.
That's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us. And Sherry, is there anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you so much, though, Curtis. It meant a lot to me for
Yeah,
you.
All
Thank
right.
you so
Thanks a
much for
lot.
having me.
Thank you guys in the chat for being here, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace, everybody.
Bye.
If you'd like to support the work I do, go to paypal.me/UOTF. Thanks.